The old crothy warrior sat in the corner of the crowded space bar, his four arms wrapped around a large mug of fermented algae brew. His scales had lost their shine years ago, and deep scars crossed his face like ancient rivers. Most patrons gave him a wide berth, not because they feared him, but because they recognized the look of someone who had seen too much. Commander Vexlar had fought in 17 major conflicts across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. He had faced the savage Gornax of Epsilon Eridani, survived the bioweapon attacks of the Zephyr Collective, and even lived through a direct assault by a Titan-class warship. But tonight, his 3 eyes kept drifting to the small group of humans sitting at the bar, laughing over their drinks. "You keep staring at them," said Krell, sliding into the seat across from Vexlar. The younger Crothy had served under Vexlar during the Border Wars. "Something wrong with the humans?" Vexlar took a long drink before answering. "Do you know why I retired, Krell? You said you were tired of war." "That was a lie." The old warrior's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I retired because I learned something that changed everything I thought I knew about warfare. About predators. About survival itself." Krell leaned forward, his scales shifting to show curiosity. "What did you learn?" "That we've been fools. All of us. Every species in the Galactic Alliance." Vexlar's primary eye focused on the humans again. One of them, a female with dark skin and short hair, was arm wrestling a Rigelian twice her size. She was winning. "We classified humans as a class, 3 species when they first made contact. Average strength, average intelligence, average threat level. We were wrong. Dangerously wrong. But their military record is a deception," Vexlar interrupted. "Not an intentional one, perhaps, but a deception nonetheless. You see, humans don't fight like we do. They don't even think like we do. And that's what makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The Rigelian at the bar slammed his hand down in defeat. The human woman helped him up, patting his shoulder companionably. Such a simple gesture, yet Vexlar saw it for what it truly was, a predator choosing not to destroy its prey. "I first realized the truth during the Kepler Station incident," Vexlar continued. "Pirates had taken the mining facility hostage. 47 different species were trapped inside, including a small human maintenance crew. The Alliance sent in 3 assault teams. We lost them all. I remember that operation. Command said the pirates had military-grade shields. They did, but that's not why we lost." Vexlar's secondary arms twitched, a sign of deep agitation. "We lost because we fight like prey animals, Krell. Quick strikes, overwhelming force, then retreat. It's how herbivores fight, desperate, panicked, hoping to survive long enough to escape." "We're not herbivores," Krell protested. "The Crothy are carnivores. We've been warriors for 10,000 years." "No." Vexlar's voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "We're omnivores who learn to fight. There's a difference. But humans are something else entirely." The bar's atmosphere shifted as more patrons arrived. A group of Altarians entered, their crystalline bodies chiming softly. They gave the humans a respectful nod, which the humans returned casually. Such a small interaction, yet loaded with unspoken understanding. After we lost the 3rd assault team, Command was preparing to write off the hostages, Vexlar continued. Then, the humans volunteered their own solution. Just 5 of them. Maintenance workers, not even military. Command laughed. I laughed. What could 5 soft, pink humans do against pirates that had defeated our best warriors? Krell's scales had shifted to a pattern of intense interest. What happened? They went in through the ventilation system. Spent 3 days crawling through ducts meant for air circulation, not living beings. 3 days without proper food, water, or rest. When I asked how they endured it, one of them said something I'll never forget. Our ancestors' persistence hunted for days. This was easy. Persistence hunted, an ancient human hunting technique. They would chase prey for days, never stopping, never rushing. Just following, walking, waiting. The prey would sprint, exhaust itself, rest, then sprint again. But the humans would just keep coming. Steady, relentless, inevitable. Vexlar noticed his mug was empty and signaled for another. The human bartender, An older male with graying hair brought it over personally. "On the house, Commander," the human said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "For your service." After the human walked away, Krell whispered he knew who you were. "How?" "Because humans notice everything," Vexlar replied. Another trait of persistence hunters. They had to track wounded prey for days, reading tiny signs, remembering every detail. That awareness never left them. Even now, in this crowded bar, I guarantee every human here has cataloged every exit, every potential threat, every possible weapon. You're making them sound like perfect killing machines. No, that's the Xerxen or the Void Hunters. Those species are built to kill. Humans are built to something far more terrifying. Vexlar paused, gathering his thoughts. They're built to endure, to adapt, to never, ever stop. The female human who had won the arm wrestling match was now engaged in animated conversation with a group of Centaurians. She laughed at something they said, the sound bright and cheerful. Yet Vexlar noticed how she positioned herself. Back to the wall, clear view of the entrance, hands never far from the table edge where she could grab it as a weapon if needed. The 5 humans in the ventilation system reached the hostages after 3 days. Vexlar continued his story. But they didn't attack immediately. They waited, watched. For 2 more days, they observed the pirates' routines, learned their weaknesses, identified which ones were leaders. They even figured out which pirates were getting sick from contaminated food supplies. 5 days in events? That's impossible. For us, yes. Our muscles would cramp, our joints would lock, our minds would break from the claustrophobia. But humans? They told me stories of their ancestors living in caves, crawling through passages barely large enough for their bodies, all to follow prey or find water. 5 days was nothing to them. Krell's scales had taken on a pale hue, a sign of growing unease. What did they do when they finally acted? They didn't fight. Not the way we understand fighting. Vexlar's voice dropped even lower. They hunted. One by one, pirates started disappearing. No sounds of battle. No alarms. They just vanished. The humans would grab them when they were alone, disable them silently, and drag them into the vents. But surely the other pirates noticed? Of course they did. And that's when the real horror began. You see, fear is a tool humans understand better than any weapon. They left signs. A bloody handprint here. A piece of torn clothing there. Strange noises in the walls. The pirates started to panic. They bunched together, stopped sleeping, began fighting among themselves. The bar's noise seemed to fade as Krell hung on every word. And then the humans started whispering, using the ventilation system to carry voices. The names of the vanished pirates. Promises of what would come next. One human told me they learned this from something called psychological warfare in their military history. But I looked deeper. These tactics predate their civilizations. Their ancestors used similar methods to separate prey from herds, to create fear and confusion. Ancestors. You keep mentioning their ancestors. Because that's the key to understanding humans, Krell. They're not like us. We evolved civilization to escape our primitive nature. Humans evolved civilization on top of their primitive nature. They didn't replace their hunting instincts. They refined them, enhanced them, gave them new tools and methods. A commotion near the bar drew their attention. A vegan trader had apparently had too much to drink and was becoming aggressive. He towered over everyone in the bar, his thick hide and massive muscles making him formidable. He was shouting about unfair trade practices, waving his 4 arms threateningly. The humans at the bar exchanged glances. No words, just looks. Then they smoothly, casually repositioned themselves. One moved to block the exit. Another shifted to protect smaller patrons. The female who had won the arm wrestling match simply continued her conversation, but her body language changed subtly, ready to move. "Watch this," Vexlar whispered to Krell. "Watch how they handle a threat." The vegan focused his anger on a small Proximan merchant, raising a massive fist. Before security could react, one of the humans, a small male who couldn't have weighed half what the vegan did, stepped between them. "Hey friend," the human said calmly. "Looks like you've had a rough day." How about I buy you a drink and you tell me about it? The vegan paused, confused. This wasn't how confrontations usually went. I what? Come on. The human gently took one of the vegan's arms. First round's on me. Let's talk about these trade problems. Maybe I can help. Within minutes, the vegan was sitting at a table, pouring out his frustrations to the sympathetic human. The threat was neutralized without a single blow thrown. Incredible, Krell breathed. Social hunting, Vexlar explained. Humans are pack hunters, but not like the wolverine or the savage dogs. Those species hunt through brute coordination. Humans hunt through manipulation of social dynamics. They can defuse a threat by making it part of their pack, or turn a pack against itself with just words. You still haven't told me what happened with the pirates. Vexlar's primary eye closed, remembering. By the 7th day, the pirates were destroying themselves. Sleep-deprived, terrified, turning on each other. The humans hadn't killed a single one. They were all tied up in the vents, alive but neutralized. When the final 3 pirates tried to execute hostages to force the humans out, that's when they learned the final truth about human persistence hunting, which was that it never stops. The humans have been saving their energy, eating the pirates' food supplies from the vents, staying rested in shifts. The pirates were exhausted, running on fear and stimulants. When the humans finally dropped from the vents, the pirates didn't stand a chance. Not because the humans were stronger or faster, but because they were still fresh, still thinking clearly, still hunting. Krell sat back, his scales rippling with distress. 5 maintenance workers defeated an entire pirate crew, without killing a single one. They could have, easily, but they chose not to. Vexlar drained his second mug. That's what truly terrifies me about humans. They have the capability to be the deadliest species in the galaxy, but they choose restraint. They choose cooperation. They choose peace. But that choice is always theirs to make, and they can change their minds. But if they're so dangerous, why haven't they conquered the galaxy? Because they don't think like conquerors. They think like persistence hunters. Vexlar gestured around the bar. Look at how they've integrated. They're everywhere now. Trading, building, learning. Making friends. Creating connections. Slowly, patiently expanding their influence without anyone realizing it. You make it sound like they're hunting us right now. Aren't they? Vexlar's 3 eyes fixed on Krell. In 2 generations, humans have gone from single-planet species to having communities on every major world. They've learned our languages, our customs, our weaknesses. They've made themselves indispensable to galactic trade. They've positioned themselves perfectly. For what? That's the question that keeps me awake at night. What is the end goal of a persistence hunt that spans generations? What happens when the hunters decide the chase is over? The human woman at the bar was leaving, saying goodbye to her various alien friends. She passed their table and paused, giving Vexlar a respectful nod. Commander Vexlar, she said, I've heard stories about you. It's an honor. You know me? Vexlar managed to keep his voice steady. I studied your tactics at the academy. Your flanking maneuver at Rigel 7 was brilliant. She smiled, and for just a moment, Vexlar saw something in her eyes. A recognition, a knowing, the look of one predator acknowledging another. Enjoy your evening, gentlemen. After she left, Krell was silent for a long moment. She knew what you were saying about them. They all know. Vexlar's voice was tired now. They know what they are. They know what we've finally figured out. And they know we can't do anything about it. Why not? Because they've already won. Vexlar stood, his old joints protesting. They've made us dependent on them. They've made us like them. They've shown us kindness and friendship and cooperation. They've given us no reason to fear them, except for the knowledge of what they could do if they chose to. So what do? Vexlar looked back at the humans at the bar, still laughing, still friendly, still terrifyingly harmless. We do nothing. We hope they continue to choose peace. We pray to whatever gods we believe in that humanity never decides to remind the galaxy why they were the only predators left on their world. Because if they ever stop being our friends... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Krell's scales had gone completely pale, understanding flooding through him. As they left the bar, Vexlar thought about the conversation he'd had with the human engineer after the Kepler station incident. He'd asked her how humans had become Earth's apex predator when they were slower than their prey, weaker than their competitors, without claws or fangs or natural armor. She'd smiled that same knowing smile and said, "We're not apex predators because we're the strongest or the fastest. We're apex predators because we never give up. Ever. Even when it takes generations. Even when it seems impossible. We just keep going until we win." Walking through the station corridors, passing humans who nodded pleasantly, Vexlar wondered if the rest of the galaxy understood what it meant to be the subject of a persistence hunt that spanned centuries. By the time they figured it out, it would be far too late. It probably already was 0.3 months after his conversation with Krell. Commander Vexlar found himself in the most unlikely of places, a human military academy on Mars. The invitation had come through official channels, requesting his expertise for a cultural exchange program. He'd almost refused, but something in the carefully worded message had piqued his curiosity. Now, standing before a room full of young human military cadets, he understood why they'd really brought him here. "Commander Vexlar has seen more combat than anyone else in this room," said Colonel Sarah Chun, the Academy's dean. "He's fought against species most of you have only read about. Today, he's going to share his experiences with us." The cadets, barely adults by human standards, watched him with intense focus. Not the eager bloodlust he'd seen in young, frothy warriors, but something more unsettling. Patience. Calculation. The eyes of hunters learning their craft. "Thank you for having me," Vexlar began, his translator converting his words smoothly. "I understand you want to hear about the Battle of Zoran Prime." Actually, one cadet raised her hand. "We'd like to hear about the Kepler station incident. Specifically, how our maintenance team defeated your assault squads." Vexlar's scales shifted involuntarily. They already knew. Of course they did. That's classified information. Colonel Shen smiled. "Not anymore. The Alliance declassified it last week. We thought you should know. The humans who saved those hostages have been teaching their methods at this academy for years. We call it the Patterson Protocol, after Chief Engineer Patterson, who led the team." "You're teaching maintenance workers to be soldiers?" "No," Chen's smile widened. "We're teaching soldiers to think like persistence hunters. There's a difference." Over the next hours, Vexlar found himself in the strangest military briefing of his life. The humans showed him their training programs, and, with each revelation, his unease deepened. Physical training consisted of endurance exercises that would break most species. Cadets ran for hours in full gear, not at sprint, but at a steady mechanical pace. They practiced crawling through impossibly tight spaces, holding uncomfortable positions for hours, going days without sleep while maintaining perfect alertness. The ancient persistence hunters could track prey for up to 80 kilometers, explained Lieutenant Morrison, a lean man whose calm demeanor belied his role as chief training instructor. "We've simply adapted those principles. Modern warfare isn't about who's strongest or fastest. It's about who's still thinking clearly on day 7 of an operation." But it was the psychological training that truly disturbed Vexlar. Cadets studied not just tactics, but anthropology, sociology, and xenopsychology. They learned the fear responses of 40 different species. They practiced something called social infiltration, becoming so naturally part of an environment that their presence went unquestioned. "Show the commander the Gengari simulation," Chen ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a Gengari colony world. Vexlar watched as a single human operative, playing a merchant, systematically gathered intelligence over the course of 6 simulated months. Not through hacking or interrogation, but through casual conversation, observation, and patience. "Gengari are naturally suspicious," the cadet running the simulation explained. "But they're also lonely. Their culture values stoicism, which creates a deep need for emotional connection they can't express. So I became their friend, listened to their problems, gave them someone to trust." "You're teaching them to exploit emotional vulnerabilities," Vexlar said, disturbed. "We're teaching them to understand other species," Chun corrected. "To see them as individuals, not just potential threats." The strongest weapon in persistence hunting isn't the spear, it's empathy. Understanding your prey so well you can predict their every move. That evening, Vexlar was invited to observe a field exercise. Two teams of cadets were dropped in the Mars wilderness with a simple objective. One team had to reach a destination 200 kilometers away. The other had to stop them. Traditional military doctrine would have the defending team set up ambushes, fortify positions, Chen explained as they watched from the observation post. Watch what our cadets do instead. The defending team did nothing. For the first day, they simply followed, staying just out of sight. They made no attacks, set no traps. They just walked. What were they doing? Vexlar asked. Persistence hunting, Chen replied. The attacking team has to worry about speed, supplies, navigation. The defenders just have to follow. Who do you think will be in better shape by day 3? By the second night, the attacking team was showing signs of stress. They couldn't rest properly, knowing they were being followed. They argued about whether to move faster or conserve energy. The defenders, working in shifts, remained fresh. This is psychological torture, Vexlar protested. This is nature, Chen countered. For 3 million years, this is how humans hunted. We're not teaching them anything new. We're just reminding them what they already are. On the third day, the attacking team made a critical error. Exhausted and paranoid, they decided to turn and fight. It was exactly what the defenders had been waiting for. The ambush was swift, decisive, and completely one-sided. The exhausted attackers didn't stand a chance against the patient defenders. In a real operation, we wouldn't engage at all, Chen explained. We just follow until the enemy made a mistake. They always do. Patience beats aggression every time. That night, Vexlar attended a dinner with the Academy's senior staff. The conversation was pleasant, covering everything from philosophy to cuisine. But underneath the civility, he could feel it, the constant assessment, the gathering of information, the subtle probing for weaknesses. You're uncomfortable, observed Dr. Kim, the Academy's chief psychologist. You see what we're teaching, and it frightens you. Shouldn't it? Vexlar responded. You're creating a generation of soldiers who think like predators. We're not creating anything, Kim said gently. We're simply acknowledging what humans have always been. For too long, we try to fight like other species, with technology, firepower, brute force. We forgot our greatest strength, which is time. Kim similed. Humans think in longer timescales than most species. You plan battles. We plan generations. You think about winning wars. We think about what comes after. Captain Torres, a combat veteran with cybernetic replacements for both legs, leaned forward. Tell me, Commander, what's the longest military campaign in Crothy history? The Unification Wars lasted 43 years. The 100 Years' War, Torres said. France and England fought for 116 years. Multiple generations of humans, born, lived, and died knowing nothing but that conflict. And that's not even our longest. We have feuds that lasted centuries, grudges that shaped entire civilizations. And you see this as a strength? Vexlar couldn't hide his horror. We see it as reality, Chen interjected. Humans don't just remember. We institutionalize memory. We build entire cultures around never forgetting. It's why we're so dangerous and why we work so hard for peace. I don't understand. Because we remember everything, Dr. Kim explained. We know the true cost of conflict. Other species fight wars. Humans live with them, generation after generation. The trauma, the loss, the cycles of vengeance. We carry it all. It's why we're so good at war and why we try so hard to avoid it. The conversation was interrupted by an alert. A situation was developing in the Sigma Draconis system. Pirates, the same syndicate from Kepler Station, had taken a medical convoy hostage. How many humans on board? Chen asked immediately. None. Mostly Altarian medical staff and Regellan refugees. Vexlar watched the humans exchange glances. Something passed between them, a decision made without words. I suppose the Alliance will send a strike team, Vexlar said. No, Chen stood. We will. Consider this a live training exercise. Commander, Would you like to observe? Against his better judgment, Vexlar agreed. The human response was unlike any military operation he'd seen. No massive fleet, no overwhelming firepower. Just a single stealth ship with 20 operators. Half weren't even military. They included a cultural anthropologist, a trade negotiator, and, surprisingly, a chef. Pirates have to eat, explained Major Williams, the operation commander, when Vexlar questioned the unusual team composition. Bad food affects morale faster than anything else. The journey to Sigma Draconis took 3 days. The humans spent the time not in combat drills, but in studying. They learned everything about the pirate organization, their history, their grievances, their internal politics. They studied the design of the medical convoy, memorizing every corridor and maintenance shaft. They analyzed the psychological profiles of the hostages, determining who would crack under pressure and who could be counted on to help. You're planning to negotiate? Vexlar asked. We're planning to win, Williams corrected. Negotiation is just one tool. So is combat. So is patience. We'll use whatever works. When they arrived, the situation was worse than reported. The pirates had executed 2 hostages and were threatening more. The Alliance fleet was standing off, unwilling to risk more deaths. Williams made a single transmission. Pirate vessel. This is Human Relief Ship Persistence. We're here to deliver medical supplies you requested 3 months ago. Permission to dock. Vexlar was stunned. What medical supplies? The ones they tried to buy through back channels, but couldn't afford, the trade negotiator explained. Antibiotics, mostly. Their ship has a bacterial infection running through it. Has been for months. They're desperate. How could you possibly know that? Because we've been watching them since Kepler, Williams said simply. Tracking their movements, their purchases, their communications. Building a complete picture. Waiting for the right moment. The pirates, suspicious but desperate, allowed them to dock. What followed was the strangest hostage rescue Vexlar had ever witnessed. The humans didn't attack. They delivered the medical supplies as promised. The chef prepared a meal that had the pirates gathering in the mess hall. The cultural anthropologist struck up conversations, identifying the power structures within the pirate crew. The negotiator began making deals, medical supplies for information, food for cooperation. Within 6 hours, the humans had mapped the entire ship, identified every pirate, and located all the hostages. They'd also diagnosed 3 critically ill pirates and begun treating them. You're helping them? Vexlar couldn't believe it. We're hunting them, Williams corrected. But hunting doesn't always mean killing. Sometimes it means making them dependent on you, making them trust you, making them need you. By the second day, the pirates were split. Half wanted to continue with their original plan. Half wanted to keep the humans around for their medical expertise and decent food. Arguments broke out. Divisions formed. That's when the humans made their move. It wasn't an attack in any traditional sense. They simply offered a deal to the reasonable pirates, surrender the violent ones, release the hostages, and in return, they'd receive full medical treatment and a chance at legitimate work. You're negotiating with terrorists, Vexlar protested. We're recognizing that terrorist isn't a species, Dr. Kim, who had joined the operation, explained. It's a choice, and choices can be changed given the right incentives and enough time. The operation concluded without a single shot fired by the humans. The pirate crew split, with the moderates subduing the extremists. The hostages were released unharmed. And, surprisingly, several of the pirates actually did take the offer of legitimate employment. This shouldn't have worked, Vexlar said during the debrief. It worked because we took the time to understand them, Williams replied. We knew their desperation, their divisions, their needs. We didn't see them as enemies to be destroyed, but as problems to be solved. And if they hadn't surrendered, Williams' expression didn't change. Then, we would have hunted them differently, sabotaged their life support to force them into the sections we wanted, cut their power to create darkness and fear, pick them off one by one in the maintenance shafts we'd memorized. The end result would have been the same. It just would have taken longer and been messy. The journey back to Mars gave Vexlar time to think. He watched the human operators, saw how they interacted. They weren't bloodthirsty warriors or cold killers. They laughed, played games, talked about their families. But underneath it all was that terrible patience, that willingness to do whatever it took for as long as it took. You asked earlier why this frightens you, Dr. Kim said, joining him in the observation lounge. I think I understand now. You're used to predators that announce themselves, sharp teeth, loud roars, threat displays. Humans don't do that. We hide our nature behind smiles and kindness. Then, how can anyone trust you? Because the smiles and kindness are real too. Kim gazed out at the stars. That's what makes us so dangerous. We're not pretending to be nice. We genuinely want to be your friends, to help you, to build a better galaxy together. But we're also capable of hunting you across generations if you threaten what we care about. Both aspects are equally true. Back at the Academy, Vexlar prepared to leave. His report to the Alliance would be interesting. How do you explain that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers, but their fundamental nature? Colonel Chin saw him off personally. I hope this visit has been educational, Commander. Too educational, Vexlar admitted. I've learned things I'm not sure I wanted to know. Knowledge is never comfortable, Chin agreed. But it's necessary. The galaxy needs to understand what humans are. Not to fear us, but to work with us. Because we're all in this together now. As his ship departed Mars, Vexlar thought about Chin's words. Humans weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were something far more subtle and perhaps more dangerous. They were persistence hunters on a galactic scale, slowly, patiently, inevitably changing the very nature of civilization itself. The truly terrifying part? They were probably right. The galaxy was better with humans in it. More peaceful, more prosperous, more connected. They'd hunted not for territory or resources, but for something far more ambitious, a fundamental change in how species interacted. And they were winning. Not through force or fear, but through patience, empathy, and the immutable fact that humans never, ever gave up. The apex predators of Earth had become the architects of galactic society, and they'd done it so skillfully that most species welcomed the change. Vexlar sent a message to Krell. You asked what happens when the persistence hunt ends. I know now. It doesn't end. It evolves. And we're all part of it whether we realize it or not. Looking back at the red planet shrinking in the distance, Vexlar wondered if any species truly understood what it meant to be befriended by a persistence hunter. By the time they figured it out, they'd already be part of the pack. Just as the humans had planned, all along 0.5 years had passed since Vexlar's visit to the Human Military Academy. In that time, the galaxy had changed in subtle but profound ways. The Galactic Alliance Council was now headed by a human diplomat. 3 of the major trade routes were managed by human logistics companies. The Universal Translation Protocol had been updated with human linguistic algorithms that somehow made communication between all species more efficient. Vexlar had retired to a quiet colony on the edge of known space, but even here, he couldn't escape the signs of humanity's invisible hunt. The colony's medical center was run by human doctors. The agricultural systems used human-designed permaculture techniques. Even the local peacekeeping force had adopted human de-escalation protocols. He was tending his garden when the message arrived. Not through official channels, but hand-delivered by a human courier who had traveled 3 weeks to reach him. From Colonel Chun, the young woman said, handing him a sealed packet. She said, "You want to see this immediately." The message was simple. The swarm has returned. We need your expertise. More importantly, we need you to witness what happens next. The swarm. Even the name sent shivers through Vexlar's scales. A hive-minded species from beyond the galactic rim that consumed entire systems, converting all matter into more of themselves. The Alliance had barely stopped them 50 years ago at a cost of billions of lives. If they had returned, within days, Vexlar found himself aboard the human command ship Endurance, surrounded by representatives from every major species. But it was the humans who were clearly in charge, their quiet confidence in stark contrast to the barely controlled panic of the others. The swarm entered through the Magellanic Gate 3 weeks ago, Admiral Reyes explained, her voice calm despite the horrific tactical display showing dozens of consumed systems. Initial Alliance response fleets were overwhelmed. Standard weapons are ineffective, just as before. Then, we're doomed, wheezed the Altarian ambassador. We barely survived last time, and we had the element of surprise. Now they know our tactics. Actually, Reyes smiled slightly. That's exactly what we're counting on. The room erupted in confused protests, but Vexlar noticed something. The humans weren't worried. Not confident in a way of fools who didn't understand the danger, but calm in the way of hunters who had been preparing for this moment. 50 years ago, the Alliance fought the Swarm like soldiers, Reyes continued. Direct engagements, massive fleets, devastating weapons. It worked barely at terrible cost. This time, we're going to handle it differently. How? Demanded the Regellan admiral. The Swarm adapts to any weapon, overwhelms any defense. They're the perfect enemy. No, said a new voice from the back of the room. They're the perfect prey. The speaker stepped forward, and Vexlar recognized her immediately. It was the woman from the bar 5 years ago, the one who had won the arm wrestling match. But now she wore the insignia of a strategic operations commander. Commander Lisa Park, Special Operations Division, she introduced herself. For the past 50 years, humanity has been studying the Swarm. Not their weapons or their tactics. Everyone did that. We studied their psychology, their evolution, their fundamental nature. The Swarm has no psychology, protested the vegan representative. They're a hive mind. No individuals, no personality, no weaknesses. Wrong on all counts. Park activated a holographic display. The Swarm does have a psychology, it's just distributed across trillions of units. They do have personality, it just operates on a scale we don't normally recognize. And they definitely have weaknesses. The display showed complex behavioral patterns, migration routes, consumption preferences. It was the kind of data that would take decades to compile. You've been tracking them, Vexlar said, understanding dawning. All this time, you've been tracking them. Since the day they retreated, Park confirmed. Small stealth probes following their trail, analyzing their patterns, building a complete psychological profile. Waiting for what? For them to return. Because we knew they would. It's in their nature. Park's smile was the cold expression of a predator who had cornered its prey. The Swarm isn't just a hive mind. It's a persistence predator, like us. It expands, consumes, moves on. But it always returns to successful feeding grounds. It just took 50 years to circle back. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. You used the entire galaxy as bait, the Altarian whispered. We use time as a weapon, Park corrected. The Swarm has perfect memory, but no innovation. They remember what worked before, so they're using the same approach. Same entry point, same expansion pattern, same tactics. They've spent 50 years preparing to fight the last war. We've spent 50 years preparing to fight this one. What followed was the most unusual military briefing Vexlar had ever attended. No talk of fleet movements or weapon systems. Instead, human experts discussed biological imperatives, energy economics, and something called collective cognitive load. The Swarm's strength is its unity, explained Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenobiologist who looked barely old enough to have finished school. But unity requires communication. Communication requires energy. The larger the Swarm grows, the more energy it needs just to maintain cohesion. So we let them grow, Park continued. We fall back systematically, evacuating populations, leaving behind specific resources they'll find irresistible. We're not fighting them. We're feeding them, controlling their diet. You're insane, the Crothy representative said. You're giving them exactly what they want. We're giving them what we want them to have, Park corrected. Resources laced with quantum markers. Food sources that require specific consumption patterns. Territory that stretches their communication lines. We're not fighting the Swarm. We're hunting it. The plan unfolded over the following weeks, and Vexlar watched in horrified fascination. Human fleets didn't engage the Swarm directly. Instead, they performed precise evacuations, always staying just ahead of the expanding hive. But the evacuations weren't random. They created a pattern, a trail that the swarm followed eagerly. "They think they're driving us back," explained Captain Morrison, whom Vexlar remembered from the Mars Academy. "In reality, we're leading them exactly where we want them to go." The abandoned colonies were left with specific resources, energy sources that emitted particular frequencies, biological matter with engineered proteins, rare elements arranged in careful distributions. To the swarm, it looked like panic. To the humans, it was a carefully laid trap that spanned light years. "This is the problem with hive minds," Dr. Tanaka explained during one briefing. "They're perfectly efficient at the tactical level, but vulnerable at the strategic level. Individual units can't question the collective decision. If the hive decides to follow a pattern, every unit follows, even if some part of the collective senses danger." By the second month, the swarm had expanded to cover nearly a quarter of the galaxy. Other species were panicking, but the humans remained calm. They had charts showing energy expenditure, communication lag times, resource allocation inefficiencies. They were watching the swarm slowly strangle itself on its own success. "Phase 2, Park announced one morning. "Time to increase the pressure." Human special operations teams began hitting swarm units at the very edges of their expansion. Not major attacks, just small, persistent harassments. A communications node destroyed here, a resource collector eliminated there. Always at the maximum range from the swarm center, forcing them to expend enormous energy responding to minimal threats. "This is insanity," the Regellan admiral protested. "Pin pricks against a tsunami. You're accomplishing nothing." "We're accomplishing everything," Park replied calmly. "Watch the energy readings." The displays showed the truth. The swarm was spending more energy maintaining its vast territory than it was gaining from consumption. The quantum markers in their food were causing subtle inefficiencies in their biological processes. The extended communication lines were creating lag times that forced the hive to slow its processing. "They're starting to starve," Vexlar realized. "You're starving them in the middle of a feast." "Persistence hunting at its finest," Park confirmed. "We can't outfight them, but we can outlast them. We can make their own success their weakness." The swarm began to contract, pulling back from its furthest expansions. But the humans had anticipated this too. The abandoned territories were rigged with automated systems that activated as the swarm retreated, creating the illusion of returning alliance forces. The swarm, programmed by evolution to expand or die, found itself caught between starvation and the appearance of encirclement. "Now we offer them a choice," Park said. "Continue the expansion and starve, or concentrate their forces for a decisive battle." "They'll choose battle," Vexlar predicted. "It's what any predator would do when cornered." "Exactly. And we know exactly where they'll attack." Park highlighted a system on the map. "Kepler Station. Where else? If where they broke through before. They'll see it as their best chance for a quick victory to replenish their energy." The human fleet began concentrating around Kepler, but it was unlike any military buildup Vexlar had seen. Along with warships came hospital ships, agricultural vessels, mobile factories, and, strangest of all, cultural preservation units. "You're planning for occupation, not battle," he observed. "We're planning for integration," Admiral Reyes corrected. "The swarm isn't evil. It's just following its nature. But natures could be changed given the right pressure and enough time." The battle, when it came, was anticlimactic. The swarm, weakened by months of engineered starvation and strategic manipulation, threw itself at Kepler Station with desperate fury. They met not a traditional defensive line, but something far more insidious. Human ships didn't try to destroy swarm units. They disabled them, isolated them, cut them off from the hive. For the first time in their species' history, individual swarm units found themselves alone, forced to make independent decisions. "Cognitive shock," Dr. Tanaka explained as they watched swarm units drift aimlessly. "They've never experienced individuality. Their entire psychology is built on collective consciousness. Suddenly, being alone is more traumatic than any weapon could be." But the humans didn't leave them to suffer. Recovery ships moved in, collecting the isolated units, placing them in specially designed habitats that provided just enough connection to ease the trauma while preventing full hive reformation. "You're rehabilitating them," Vexlar said, amazed. "We're evolving them," Park replied. "The swarm as it exists can't coexist with other species. But individual units, given support and time, can develop independent consciousness. We're not destroying the swarm. We're offering them a choice: continue as they are and starve, or evolve into something that can survive in a galaxy with other species." The process took months. The swarm's collective intelligence fought against the change, but biology and economics were inexorable. Maintaining the hive across such distances with compromised resources was impossible. Piece by piece, the collective began to fragment. Some fragments fought to the end, and those the humans destroyed with clinical efficiency. But others, especially those composed of younger units, began to adapt. They learned to function in smaller groups, to make decisions without the overwhelming voice of the collective, to see other species not as food but as potential allies. "This was your plan all along," Vexlar said to Park one day, watching former swarm units learning to communicate with alliance species. "Not to destroy them, but to change them." "Destruction is easy," Park replied. "Any species can learn to kill efficiently. But humans learned long ago that the most successful hunts don't end with death. They end with domestication. We didn't become Earth's apex predator by killing everything. We became apex by turning predators into partners. The wolves became dogs," Vexlar remembered from his research into human history. "And the swarm will become something new, something that can grow and thrive without consuming everything in its path." Park's expression softened slightly. "It will take generations, but humans are good at thinking in generations." The aftermath was complex. Not all species approved of the human approach. Many wanted the swarm completely destroyed, not reformed. But as former swarm units began contributing to galactic society, their unique biological abilities proving useful in countless applications, opposition gradually faded. Vexlar stayed to observe the entire process. He watched human patience work its magic, saw former hive-minded killers learn to think, to choose, to create rather than just consume. It was, he realized, the ultimate expression of persistence hunting, not just defeating an enemy, but transforming them so completely that the very concept of enemy became obsolete. "You've changed the nature of warfare itself," he told Admiral Reyes at the conclusion of operations. "No," she corrected gently. "We've simply reminded the galaxy that humans never really practiced warfare. We practice hunting, and the best hunters know that the ultimate victory isn't in the kill. It's in the transformation." As Vexlar prepared to return to his quiet colony, Park approached him with a final thought. "You've spent years warning others about humans being apex predators," she said. "You weren't wrong, but you missed the full picture. We're not apex predators because we're the most dangerous. We're apex because we're the most patient. We don't just defeat our enemies. We wait until they're ready to become our friends. And if they never become ready..." Park's smile was gentle, but carried the weight of 3 million years of evolution. "Then we keep waiting, and walking, and watching. Forever, if necessary. Because that's what persistence hunters do. We never give up. We just change our tactics, and keep going until we win." On the journey home, Vexlar contemplated everything he'd witnessed. The humans had faced the galaxy's greatest threat not with superior firepower or desperate heroics, but with patience, understanding, and the inexorable pressure of time. They had turned certain destruction into an opportunity for evolution, enemies into potential allies, fear into hope. He thought about his initial warning years ago. The humans were apex predators the galaxy should fear. He'd been right, but also profoundly wrong. Yes, humans were apex predators, but their true hunt wasn't for prey. It was for a better future, pursued with the same relentless patience their ancestors had used to chase antelope across ancient savannas. The galaxy had nothing to fear from human predators, Vexlar realized, because the galaxy itself was not prey to be consumed, but a hunting ground to be preserved, protected, and improved. And the humans would pursue that goal with the same tireless determination they brought to everything else. Forever, if necessary. As a ship docked at his colony, Vexlar found a small package waiting for him. Inside was a datapad with a message from Park. Thank you for witnessing. Someone needs to tell this story. Someone the galaxy trusts. Someone who understands both the fear and the hope of what we are. Attached was a draft of a book title, The Long Hunt, How Humanity Became the Galaxy's Shepherds. Vexlar smiled, his scales shifting to a pattern of amused acceptance. Even in this, the humans were patient hunters. They had hunted him not for harm, but to make him their storyteller, their bridge between what the galaxy feared and what it needed to understand. He began to write, knowing that this too was part of their hunt. The slow, patient transformation of fear into understanding, of isolation into community, of a galaxy of separate species into something greater. The apex predators of Earth had become the apex shepherds of stars. And their hunt would never end, because it was a hunt for something that could always be improved, the future itself. Somewhere in the renovated sections of Kepler Station, former swarm units were learning to paint, their distributed consciousness finding new expression in art. On Mars, human cadets studied xenopsychology alongside military tactics. Throughout the galaxy, the persistent hunt continued in a million small ways, transforming civilization one patient step at a time. And Vexlar wrote, adding his voice to the greatest hunt of all, the human pursuit of a galaxy where every species could thrive, where every enemy could become an ally, where the only prey was the impossibility of peace itself. A hunt that would never end, because humans never gave up. Ever.